Have you ever caught yourself thinking? Not just noticing that you're thinking, but actually trying to observe the thought as it happens. Trying to step outside your own mind and watch it work. If you try it right now, and I invite you to, you will notice something strange. The moment you try to observe your thinking, the thinking changes. The observer and the observed are the same thing. You can't get outside the system because you are the system. There's a name for this, and understanding it might quietly change how you see yourself, how you see consciousness, and how you see the universe. The name is a strange loop.
We've been climbing for quite some time.
Indeed. Isn't it lovely?
It is not lovely. It is deeply troubling. We are back where we started.
Yes,
But we went up.
we did.
And yet here we are at the bottom again.
At the top, actually. It depends entirely on how you look at it.
That makes no sense whatsoever.
Precisely. Does anything that matters ever make immediate sense?
Why are we on this particular staircase?
Because a mathematician named Gödel, an artist named Escher, and a composer named Bach all built versions of it, in numbers, in pictures, and in music. And a man named Hofstadter spent 777 pages explaining why all three were building the same thing.
And what were they building?
An explanation of you.
Me specifically?
You, me, anyone who has ever caught themselves thinking about the fact that they are thinking, which, if I am not mistaken, is everyone who has ever lived.
I'm not sure whether to be flattered or alarmed.
In my experience, the most important things produce both feelings simultaneously. Shall we keep climbing?
Yeah.
In 1979, a man named Douglas Hofstadter published a book unlike anything before or since. It asked one question, just one, across 777 pages. How does something that can think arise from things that cannot? Your brain is made of neurons. Each neuron is not conscious. It does not think. It does not feel. It simply fires or doesn't fire, on or off, like a switch. And yet, from billions of these simple switches, something extraordinary emerges, something that can wonder about its own existence, something that can ask, how did I get here? What am I? Why does anything feel like anything at all? Hofstadter called this kind of self-referential structure a strange loop, a pattern in which a system built of simple parts comes to represent and refer to itself. And he found the same pattern hiding, perfectly disguised, in three completely different domains. Johann Sebastian Bach wrote a piece called the Canon. It is a musical puzzle. Only one line is written, and it is played forward and backward simultaneously. More precisely, it is a retrograde canon, where one voice is a mirrored image of the other. The music falls back on itself, like two people traversing the same road in opposite direction, passing each other in the middle. Listen to that. Bach wrote music that is its own mirror, and in that perfect symmetry, something uncanny appears, as if the music were reflecting on itself. Maurits Cornelis Escher made a lithograph called Drawing Hands. It shows a right hand drawing a left hand, which is at the same moment drawing the right hand. Each hand creates the other. Neither exists without the other. The lithograph of two hands drawing each other into existence. Which came first? The question dissolves. There is no first. There is only the loop. And then there is Kurt Gödel. In 1931, Gödel proved something that shook mathematics to its foundations. He showed that any formal system, any consistent set of rules capable of expressing basic arithmetic, will always contain true statements that cannot be proved from within its own rules. Not because the rules are poorly designed, but because the moment a system becomes rich enough to represent itself, to make statements about its own structure, something unexpected appears. Limits, edges it cannot reach from the inside. Hofstadter saw in this a metaphor for minds. The deeper a system turns inward on itself, the more it encounters the boundaries of its own perspective. In that sense, poetically, not literally, the system can see remarkably far, but only because it has walls it cannot see over. Three men, three completely different worlds: music, visual art, mathematics. Bach died more than a century before Gödel and Escher were born. And Gödel and Escher, though near contemporaries, worked in realms so distant they might never have imagined their ideas belong together. None of them set out to solve the same puzzle. Hofstadter was the one who realized that all three were building the same staircase.
What are you writing? A description of everything I know. Everything? Everything I know that can be written down within the rules of this notebook. And will it ever be finished? No. There will always be things I know that I cannot prove within the notebook's own rules. Gödel showed me that. Rather generously, I thought.
That sounds like a terrible design flaw.
On the contrary, it is the most important feature. A system that could fully describe itself from within itself would be a closed system. Nothing could surprise it. Nothing could exceed it. It would be complete and therefore dead. Dead? Think of it this way. Suppose a very obedient computer is given an impossible task. It cannot recognize that the task is impossible. It has no rule in its rulebook that says, "This is hopeless, stop." And so it runs, forever, searching for an answer that does not exist. But you would stop. Within seconds, probably. You would look at the task, recognize the hopelessness, and jump out. You would exit the system you were given.
Because I'm intelligent.
Because you are a strange loop. You can observe the system you are operating within and decide to leave it. That is precisely what the computer cannot do, and it is precisely what makes you conscious.
But then, can I jump out of myself?
Ah, now you have asked the right question.
We are remarkable systems, you and I. We can observe ourselves. We can catch ourselves in the middle of a thought and say, wait, why am I thinking this? We can recognize our own patterns. We can step back from a task when we see it is hopeless and choose to leave it. Current machines do not seem to do this in the rich, self-aware way humans do. But whether they ever could remains one of the most contested questions of our time. Perhaps that capacity to step back from oneself, to observe the observing, is part of what consciousness is about. And yet, we cannot jump out of ourselves. We can observe our thoughts, but the observation is itself a thought. We can study our patterns, but the studying is itself a pattern. No matter how high we climb this staircase of self-reflection, we arrive back where we started, inside ourselves, inside the loop. Gödel showed something like this for formal systems. Hofstadter believed something like this for minds. They are not the same claim, but they point in the same direction. What Gödel found was not about complexity alone. A system that is not expressive enough to represent itself has no incompleteness problem. The crucial ingredient is self-reference. The moment a system becomes rich enough to represent itself within itself, to make statements about its own structure, limits appear. Edges it cannot reach from the inside. Not because it is poorly built, but because of what it is doing. turning inward, modeling itself, becoming, in however small a way, aware of its own existence. Hofstadter saw in this a mirror for the mind. We too are systems that represent ourselves within ourselves. We build models of the world and eventually a model of the modeler. And perhaps that is precisely where our own limits come from. Not from how complex we are, but from the fact that we refer to ourselves at all. Perhaps that is the shape of what we are. A pattern so intricate it learned to notice itself. A strange loop so complex it became aware of its own looping. That is you. That is what you are. Not a ghost in a machine. A pattern so intricate it learned to notice itself. Think about the countless techniques we have invented to understand ourselves. Therapy, journaling, meditation, psychoanalysis, philosophy, self-help books, and there are millions of them. Testaments, everyone, to how desperately we want to know ourselves fully. They all help. Many of them genuinely help. But perhaps none of them can give you complete self-knowledge. And now you have a sense of why. It's not because the techniques are inadequate. It may be because complete self-knowledge is impossible for any mind rich enough to model itself. You are a self-referential system, a system that has turned inward far enough to build a model of itself. And perhaps it is that very self-reference, that inward turning, that means there will always be something just beyond what you can fully see. Not because you are not intelligent enough, not because you haven't tried hard enough, but because the tool you're using to look is the very thing you're looking at. You are Gödel's theorem made of neurons. There will always be something more, something just past the edge of what you can see when you look inward. That is not a tragedy. That is an open door. Walt Whitman wrote, "I am large. I contain multitudes." He didn't know about Gödel, but he felt the same truth. Every episode of this series carries a question that Hofstadter could not have asked in 1979, because the world that makes it urgent did not yet exist. Here is the one this episode raises. We said one of the signatures of consciousness, one of the things that separates us from a simple machine, is the ability to step back from a task when we see it is hopeless, to jump out of the system. A computer given an impossible instruction has no rule that says stop. It runs forever. We do not. But now we have machines that are not simple. We have systems trained on more human language than any human being could read in 1,000 lifetimes. Systems that can discuss philosophy, write poetry, explain quantum mechanics, and hold a conversation that feels at moments startlingly alive. Do they jump out? Do they know when a task is hopeless? Do they have anything resembling the strange loop we have been exploring today? Hofstadter himself looked at these systems in 2022 and said, not yet. His criterion was precise. For a machine to have a genuine self, it must know itself as well as you or I know ourselves. It must have a real model of its own tendencies, its own strengths, its own failures, not a statistical approximation, but a living self-referential loop. By that criterion, he concluded, current systems are, in his words, cluelessly clueless. They produce sentences that sound self-aware, but there is no self behind them doing the awareing. He may be right. He may be right in ways that will remain true for decades. Or the answer may change faster than any of us expect. I don't know. And I think that not knowing, clearly, honestly, without pretending to a certainty we don't have, is the only responsible place to stand right now. We will return to this question in every episode, and by the end of this series, you will have tools to think about it more carefully than almost anyone who hasn't spent years studying it. But for now, hold it. Let it be open.
So we are loops, strange ones, the strangest kind. Loops that know they are loops and are confused about it. I'm not sure if that makes me feel magnificent or terrifying. Both, I should think. Most true things do. And this staircase, are we going to be climbing it for a while? 777 pages worth, give or take. And will we understand ourselves completely by the end? No, but we will understand very clearly and very beautifully exactly why we cannot. And I have always found that the next best thing.
We've only touched the first thread of this braid today, the strange loop, the staircase that climbs back to where it began, the mind that can observe everything except itself completely, the reason that no matter how many techniques we use to understand ourselves, some part of us will always remain just past the edge of our own seeing. And the question we have just opened, which we will carry through every episode of this series, of what all this means for the machines we are now building, machines that can do things we could not have imagined 20 years ago, machines that do not yet and may never have a strange loop of their own. Or might, we don't know. And that not knowing is where we will be working together for a long time. I want to tell you what this series is. It is not a course on Gödel, Escher, and Bach, though that is where we begin, and it is the most beautiful place I know to begin. It is not a guide to artificial intelligence, though that question will be with us every step of the way. It is one person, me, thinking through the hardest questions I know, in public, as honestly as I can, about what it means to be conscious, about what it means to be a self, about what happens to both of those things as we share the world with systems that may eventually share some version of them with us. I am an astrophysicist by training. I've spent years working with data that describes things light years away. Things that I have never seen, will never touch, will never fully know. And I have learned that you can come to love something you cannot fully see. That knowing something through its pattern, through the shape it leaves in numbers, in equations, in the structure of its relationships, is a real kind of knowing. Not complete, but real. I think that is what this series is trying to do. To know ourselves and each other a little more through the shape we leave. To use these ideas not to feel clever about consciousness, but to feel perhaps a little more present to it, a little more awake to the strangeness and the beauty of being a loop that knows it is looping. And perhaps, if we do this well, a little more kind to each other and to whatever else in time might find itself looping beside us. In the next episode, we are going to ask a question that has become one of the most urgent questions of our time. If meaning lives in pattern, if what makes a Bach fugue the same piece on a harpsichord and a piano is not the notes themselves, but the structure of their relationships, then what is the difference between a system that processes a pattern and one that truly understands it? Can a machine read a love letter and feel anything at all? Hofstadter wrote about this in 1979. The world he was imagining has now, in a strange and unexpected way, arrived. And what arrived looks different from what he imagined. We will talk about all of that together. But before you go, the question I want to leave you with: when did you first become aware that you exist? Not when you were born, not when someone told you your name, but the first moment, the first strange, dizzy, inexplicable moment when you realize that there was something it felt like to be you. Write it in the comments if you remember it. I would genuinely love to know. I see you in the next step.